The massive crystal towers of the Zephyrian Empire stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, Admiral Kethfer stood before a wall of glowing screens, his 4 eyes scanning the data that had just arrived from the outer rim of their territory. "Sir, we have detected strange energy readings from Sector 7 Alpha," reported Lieutenant Vexan, her voice carrying the formal tone required in the presence of high command. "The signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Kethfer scaled. Fingers drummed against the metal console. In his 300 years of service to the Empire, he had seen dozens of primitive species take their first steps into space. Most were easily conquered, their crude ships no match for Zephyrian technology. This would likely be no different. "Show me the analysis," he ordered. The screens flickered, displaying detailed scans of the mysterious vessels. Kethfer's mandibles clicked as he studied the data. The ships were small, roughly built, with what appeared to be simple fusion engines. Their hulls were made of basic metal alloys that any first-year cadet could identify. "They call themselves humans," Vexan continued, reading from her tablet. "They appear to be from a single world, in an unremarkable system. Our long-range sensors suggest they have been space-capable for less than 200 years. Nodded, his interest already fading. 200 years was barely an eye blink in galactic terms. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the stars for over 3,000 years, conquering and absorbing hundreds of worlds. These humans would be just another entry in the great book of imperial victories. "What about their homeworld?" he asked, following. "Standard protocol." Vexan's expression grew curious as she scrolled through the xenobiology report. "This is interesting, sir. Their planet has unusually high gravity, nearly twice what most species can tolerate. The surface is covered with aggressive predators and extreme weather patterns. Our scientists classify it as a death world." The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. Death worlds were rare, and species that evolved on them were typically ... problematic. Still, their technology appeared laughably primitive compared to Zephyrian standards. "Show me their weapons," Kethfer commanded. The screens changed to display grainy images of human vessels. Their weapons appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles, metal slugs fired at high velocity, no energy weapons, no plasma cannons, no quantum disruptors, just crude bullets launched from primitive railguns. "Pathetic," Kethfer muttered. "They fight with sticks and stones while we wield the power of stars." The bridge crew chuckled at their commander's joke. The humans' primitive weapons would be useless against Zephyrian energy shields. Their small ships would crumble under the assault of true warships. Kethfer turned to his communications officer. "Send word to the High Command. We have discovered." "Another minor species?" "They show signs of aggressive expansion, but pose no significant threat. Should we initiate contact protocols, sir?" asked Vexan. The Admiral considered this. The Empire had 2 approaches to new species: peaceful integration for the truly primitive, or military conquest for those who might eventually become problems. These humans, with their Death World origins and expanding fleet, fell into the second category. "No," Kethfer decided. "Their expansion into our territory is unauthorized. They need to learn their place in the galactic order." He walked to the central command console and activated the fleet deployment system. The holographic display showed the positions of all Zephyrian forces across their vast territory. The 47th Fleet was currently conducting training exercises near the border worlds, perfect for a demonstration of Imperial power. "Deploy the 47th Fleet to Sector 7 Alpha," Kethfer ordered. 200 ships should be more than adequate for standard subjugation operations. The crew began transmitting orders across subspace. Within minutes, Admiral Morketh of the 47th Fleet was receiving his mission briefing. The humans would face the full might of the Zephyrian war machine. As the orders went out, Kethfer felt a familiar satisfaction. Another primitive species would learn to bow before the Empire's power. Their crude ships would be swept aside, their world claimed for the greater glory of the Zephyrian people. He dismissed the bridge crew and walked to his private quarters. Already composing the victory report, he would send to Emperor Zeftos. The conquest of the humans would be swift and decisive. A textbook example of imperial efficiency. outside his window. The twin suns of the capital world began to set, painting the crystal spires in shades of orange and gold. Across the vast distances of space, 47th Fleet was already beginning its journey toward what would surely be an easy victory. Admiral Kethfer poured himself a glass of vintage Altarian wine and settled into his favorite chair. By the time he finished the bottle, he assumed the human problem would be solved. Their primitive ships would be scrap metal, their crews prisoners of war, and their defiant expansion would be at an end. The Admiral had no way of knowing that he had just made the greatest tactical error in the Empire's 3,000-year history. The humans waiting in Sector 7 Alpha were not the helpless primitives he imagined. They were something far more dangerous. Survivors of a death world who had learned to fight among the stars. Commander Hansal stood on the bridge of the mining vessel Bizen's Pride, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the main view screen. The ship hummed quietly around him, its engines designed for hauling or across star systems, not for fighting wars. Behind him, his crew of 30 miners and engineers worked at stations that had been hastily modified with weapon controls. Contact. Bearing 27 Mark IV called out sensor operator Minho, his voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. I count 200 vessels, all military class. They're big, sir. Really big. Saul nodded, his weathered face showing. No fear. At 52 years old, he had spent most of his life in space. First as a soldier in the Outer Rim conflicts, then as a civilian contractor when the military downsized. Like most humans his age, war was simply another job hazard. All ships. This is Hansal. Form up in defensive pattern Delta 7. Protect the ore haulers at all costs. His voice carried across the comm channels to the other 29. Human vessels scattered throughout the asteroid field. Engineer Dalho looked up from his console, wiping grease from his hands. Sir, should we try talking to them first? Maybe. They just want to chat. The answer came in the form of brilliant energy beams lancing through space. The alien fleet had opened fire without warning, their weapons lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Several shots struck the Bizen's Pride, but the reinforced mining hull held firm. So much for diplomacy, Hansel muttered. All ships, weapons free. Remember your training. The human response was immediate and devastating. Ships that looked like flying junkyards suddenly moved with the grace of hunting wolves. The Bizen's Pride rolled hard to starboard, its improvised railgun spitting metal slugs at incredible velocity. Other human vessels followed suit, their various weapons creating a deadly crossfire. Pilot Jinnah, barely 25 and fresh from the mining academies, threw their ship into a spiral that would have killed a normal crew. But humans were not normal. They had evolved under crushing gravity, and their bodies could handle forces that would liquefy other species. Target the big one on the left, Hansal ordered, pointing at a Zephyrian cruiser that was trying to flank them. Dalho, give me everything the engines have got. The mining ship accelerated like a missile, its fusion drive pushing it far beyond safe operating limits. Behind them, other human vessels executed similar maneuvers, using tactics that seemed impossible to their alien opponents. The Zephyrian fleet had expected easy victory. Their energy shields were designed to stop plasma weapons and particle beams, not solid metal slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed. When the human, kinetic rounds struck, they punched straight through the shields like they were paper. Direct hit on the cruiser, reported Minho, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. Their shields are down and I'm reading massive internal damage. Hansel watched as the alien vessel began to list, its elegant hull cracked and bleeding. Atmosphere around them. The battle raged with an intensity that surprised even him. The humans fought like they had been born to it, which in many ways they had. Engineer Dalho was simultaneously managing the ship's power systems, targeting computers, and damage control. Sir, I'm reading elevated stress on the port engine. We're pushing her harder than she was built for. She hold, Hansel replied with confidence. The Bizen's Pride had been built by humans for humans. Every system had backup systems, and every backup had a backup. It was the only way to survive in the deadly vacuum of space. The alien fleet tried to adapt, but their tactics were based on fighting civilized opponents who followed established rules of engagement. The humans followed no such rules. They used the asteroid field like cover, disappearing behind rocks only to emerge at unexpected angles. They rammed damaged alien ships with their reinforced hulls. They even used their mining charges as improvised weapons. Pilot Jinnah suddenly called out, "3 alien fighters coming in fast on our tail." "I see them," Hansel replied calmly. He activated the ship's mining laser, originally designed to cut through solid rock. The focused beams sliced through the lead fighter like a hot knife through butter. The battle continued for 6 hours. The humans lost 3 ships, but the alien fleet was devastated. Nearly half of their 200 vessels were destroyed or crippled, the rest fleeing in disorder back to their own territory. As the last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, Ansel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Around him, his crew was already beginning damage assessment and casualty reports. Minho sent a message to Terra Command. He ordered, "Tell them we made contact with a hostile alien species. Standard first contact protocols were not followed by the aliens." "What should we do now, sir?" asked Jinnah, her hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Hansel looked out at the debris field that had once been a proud alien fleet. "We go back to mining, but keep the weapon systems ready. Something tells me they'll be back with friends." None of them realized that they had just shattered the confidence of a 3,000-year-old galactic empire. The aliens had learned a terrible lesson. Humans were not the primitive species they appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous. The emergency meeting had been going on for 18 hours straight. In the grand war room of the Zephyrian capital, the most powerful military minds in the galaxy sat around a massive crystal table, staring at holographic displays that showed the impossible. Admiral Kethfer stood at the head of the table, his 4 eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Before him lay the battle reports from the 47th Fleet, and every single page made his stomach turn. 200 of the Empire's finest warships had been sent to crush a handful of primitive miners. Only half had returned, and those that did were barely functional. "Explain this to me again," demanded Emperor Zeftos, his voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of imperial authority. The golden ruler of the galaxy had not slept since receiving the first reports. "How did civilian miners destroy half of our fleet?" Chief Military Analyst Morden shuffled through data crystals with trembling claws. She had spent her entire career studying alien combat tactics, but nothing in her experience prepared her for what she was seeing now. "Your Majesty, their weapons are primitive in design, but devastatingly effective," she began, activating a hologram that showed human kinetic projectiles. "They use solid metal slugs accelerated to extreme velocities. Our energy shields were designed to stop plasma and particle weapons, not solid matter moving at these speeds." General Vexkoth, commander of the Imperial Guard, leaned forward with interest. "Kinetic weapons are nothing new. We abandoned them centuries ago because they're inefficient." "That's where you're wrong," General Morden replied, highlighting sections of the battle data. "Human kinetic weapons use exotic matter cores. When they impact, they don't just punch holes, they create massive internal explosions. It's like they're firing miniature bombs." Emperor Zeftos studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human ships had moved in patterns that defied military logic, using the asteroid field in ways that suggested deep familiarity with three-dimensional combat. "What about their ship movements?" he asked. Admiral Kethfer reported that they fought like experienced warriors, not civilian contractors. Intelligence Director Quavesh activated another set of displays. "This is where it gets disturbing, Your Majesty. We intercepted human communications during the battle. They spoke of overtime pay and weekend shifts, complained about missing their families and wanting to finish the job quickly so they could go home." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. "You're telling me General Vexkoth said slowly that civilian workers destroyed our fleet while complaining about work schedules?" "It gets worse," Quavesh continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been analyzing their ship designs. These vessels were originally built for mining and cargo transport. The weapons were added later, apparently by the crews themselves. They're fighting in modified industrial equipment." Admiral Kethfer felt his legs go weak. he had sent 200 warships to fight what appeared to be a maintenance crew with improvised weapons. Emperor? Zefto stood and walked to the massive viewing screen that showed deep space sensor readings. Strange gravitational anomalies were appearing at the edge of Zephyrian territory, signatures that their best scientists couldn't identify. "What do we know about human military history?" the Emperor asked. Morden accessed another data file, her expression growing more worried by the minute. "This is the most disturbing part, Your Majesty. Based on intercepted data streams and communication fragments, humanity has been engaged in large-scale warfare for over 2 centuries. Against whom? We don't know. The humans refer to something called the Forever War, but they never mention who they're fighting. What we do know is that it spans multiple galaxies and involves conflicts on a scale we can barely comprehend." The Emperor turned back to face his advisors. "Are you telling me that the ships that destroyed our fleet were using outdated equipment? Based on human communication intercepts? Yes?" One of their commanders complained that they were using old gear and wished they had proper military hardware instead of mining junk. General Vexkoth stood abruptly, his chair clattering to the floor. "That's impossible. If civilian contractors with obsolete equipment can devastate our fleet, what could their actual military accomplish?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications, but none wanted to voice them. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Zarvin, bursting into the war room without proper protocol. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions approaching our outer systems. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Emperor. Zeftos felt his heart skip a beat. "Show me." The main display changed to show sensor readings from the edge of Zephyrian space. Massive objects were moving through hyperspace, their gravitational signatures so large that they registered as small planets. But planets didn't move at faster than light speeds. "How many?" the Emperor whispered. "We can't get an accurate count." "Your Majesty? Our sensors aren't designed to track objects of this size moving at these velocities, but preliminary estimates suggest ... thousands." The war room fell completely silent. Outside the crystal walls, the twin suns of the capital world continued their eternal dance. But inside, the greatest military minds of the galaxy faced the terrifying realization that they had awakened something beyond their understanding. The humans were coming, and they were bringing friends. The data streams captured from the human mining vessels had taken 3 days to decode. Now in the deepest levels of the Imperial Intelligence Complex, Senior Analyst Vexari stared at her screens with growing horror. What she had discovered would change everything the Zephyrian Empire thought they knew about the galaxy. "Director Quavesh," she called across the secure facility, her voice barely steady. "You need to see this immediately." Director Quavesh approached the workstation, his tentacles twitching with nervous energy. "What have you found?" Vexari's claws trembled as she activated the holographic display. "Been analyzing the human data fragments we recovered from their ships. Sir, we've made a terrible mistake." The display showed a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space, but with additions that made Quavesh's blood run cold. Red zones marked areas of active conflict, stretching across multiple spiral arms. Yellow zones indicated recent battlefields. Green zones showed human-controlled territory. "This can't be accurate," Quavesh whispered. "This shows warfare on a scale that's impossible." "It's accurate, sir. The humans have been fighting something they call the Forever War for over 200 years. Multiple galaxy-spanning conflicts against entities they refer to only as the enemy. We still don't know who or what the enemy is, but the scale of the fighting is beyond anything we've ever imagined." Vexari manipulated the display, zooming in on specific sectors. "Look at this, sir. Battle reports from something called the Centauri Meat Grinder, a continuous engagement lasting 47 years. At the Vega Orbital Fortress Complex, a defensive structure that spans an entire star system. The Andromeda Expeditionary Force, apparently they're fighting a war in another galaxy entirely." Quavesh felt his multiple stomachs churn. "What about the ships that destroyed our fleet?" "That's the worst part," Vexari said, bringing up technical specifications. "The vessels we encountered were using what humans classify as obsolete Generation 3 mining platform technology. Their current military hardware is apparently 7 generations more advanced. The director's tentacles went limp. You're saying? Civilian contractors with obsolete equipment destroyed half the 47th Fleet? Yes, sir. And there's more. Vixari activated another display showing communication intercepts. The miners who fought our fleet have been sending regular reports back to something called Terra Command. They described our attack as annoying and requested proper backup to deal with the locals. Quavesh stumbled backward, his alien physiology struggling to process the implications. What kind of backup are they requesting? Based on the communication patterns, something called 7th Fleet has been dispatched to handle the situation. The miners seemed relieved, saying that the real military would sort things out quickly. At that moment, alarms began wailing throughout the intelligence complex. Emergency lights bathed the facility in red as automatic systems activated crisis protocols. Director Quavesh to the command center immediately, echoed through the speakers. Priority Alpha emergency. They rushed through corridors filled with panicking personnel to reach the main command center. Emperor Zeftos himself stood before the massive sensor displays, his royal composure cracking under the weight of what he was seeing. Director, the Emperor said without turning around, "Tell me you have explanations for this." The main display showed long-range sensors detecting gravitational anomalies unlike anything in their databases. But these weren't random distortions. They were moving in perfect formation, approaching Zephyrian space with purpose. Your Majesty, Quavesh began, "We've analyzed the human data streams. What we discovered is disturbing. Speak plainly. The humans have been fighting galactic-scale wars for centuries. The ships that destroyed our fleet were civilian contractors using obsolete equipment. What's approaching us now appears to be their actual military." Emperor Zeftos finally turned to face his intelligence director. In 3,000 years of rule, the Emperor had never shown fear. But now, his eyes held something that looked very much like terror. "How many ships? We can't get accurate readings, Your Majesty. The gravitational signatures are too massive. Yes. Our sensors suggest objects the size of small moons, but moving at impossible speeds." Chief Scientist Morkov stepped forward, his voice shaking.
"Your Majesty, I've been studying the sensor data. These aren't just large ships. They're using some form of space-time manipulation that our physics can't explain. They're literally folding space around themselves." The Emperor walked to his command throne and sat heavily.
Around him, the greatest minds of the Empire struggled to comprehend what they were facing. "What do we know about human military doctrine?" he asked. Vexari consulted her datapad. Based on the intercepted communications, they operate under something called escalation protocol. They apparently have 14 separate fleets, each capable of independent galactic operations. The force approaching us is designated 7th Fleet, and the others, according to their communications. 1st through 3rd Fleet are currently engaged in something called the Andromeda Campaign. 4th and 5th Fleet are in reserve. 6th Fleet is conducting operations in what they call the Outer Dark. The silence that followed was deafening. The Zephyrian Empire, masters of 800 star systems, had apparently provoked a species that casually fought wars across multiple galaxies. "Sir," reported sensor operator Keithan, "the approaching formations are decelerating. Estimated arrival in 12 hours. Emperor Zeftos closed his eyes and wondered if his 3,000-year-old empire was about to meet its end. Space itself seemed to tear apart as the human fleet arrived. What had been empty void moments before suddenly filled with vessels so massive that they blocked out entire starfields. Emperor Zeftos stood on the observation deck of his palace, watching through reinforced crystal as impossible shapes materialized in the darkness. The lead ship was larger than anything the Zephyrians had ever built. Its hull stretched for hundreds of kilometers, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Behind it, thousands of other vessels took formation, destroyers the size of cities, carriers that could house entire populations, and support ships that dwarfed the largest Zephyrian battleships. "Your Majesty," whispered Admiral Kethfer, his voice barely audible, "the sensor readings they're off the scale. That lead ship registers as having more firepower than our entire home fleet." Emperor Zeftos said nothing, simply stared. At the armada that had appeared in his space, knowing that his empire's 3,000 years of dominance were about to end, on the bridge of the human dreadnought New Sol, Fleet Admiral Parkman stood calmly before the main view screen. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had spent decades fighting wars across the galaxy. Bridge was surprisingly simple. No crystal displays or exotic technology. Just solid human engineering designed to function under the worst possible conditions. "Tactical report," Parkman ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles that spanned star systems. Lieutenant Commander Lena looked up from her station. "Zephyrian forces are maintaining defensive positions around their capital world. I count approximately 500 vessels, mostly older designs. They're not moving to intercept." "Wise of them," Parkman commented dryly. "Communications open." A channel to the Zephyrian command. The massive holographic display at the front of the bridge flickered to life, showing the interior of the Zephyrian palace. Emperor Zeftos appeared, his golden robes unable to hide the fear in his alien features. "I am Fleet Admiral Parkman of the Terran Federation's 7th Fleet." The human commander began, his tone formal but not hostile. "Your forces attacked our civilian contractors in Sector 7 Alpha. We're here to discuss reparations and establish proper diplomatic relations." Emperor Zeftos struggled to find his voice. Through the communication link, he could see the human bridge and beyond it. View screens showing the endless rows of warships stretching to the horizon. Fighter craft moved in formations that numbered in the millions, their movements so coordinated. They looked like flocks of mechanical birds. This entire armada came for a mining dispute. The Emperor finally managed to ask. Parkman's expression didn't change. "Your forces destroyed 3 civilian vessels and killed 47 non-combatants. In human space, that's considered an act of war. But surely this is excessive force for such a minor incident." "This is 7th Fleet," Parkman replied matter-of-factly. "We happened to be in the area conducting routine patrols. The incident with your forces was... convenient timing." Emperor Zeftos felt his heart skip. "Your entire fleet was already mobilized." "Your Majesty seems confused," Parkman said, consulting a datapad. "This is one of 14 active fleets. 1st through 3rd Fleet are currently engaged in the Andromeda Spiral campaign. 4th and 5th are in strategic reserve. 6th Fleet is handling operations in the Outer Rim." The Emperor's mind reeled. 14 fleets, each one apparently capable of crushing his entire empire and your home defense forces. Parkman's aide, Commander Jinwoo, stepped forward. "Home fleet consists of approximately 200,000 vessels, Your Majesty. They rarely leave the Sol system unless we're facing a serious threat." The numbers were incomprehensible.
How the
Zephyrian Empire's entire military consisted of fewer than 10,000 ships. The humans were casually discussing fleet strengths that exceeded his empire's population. "What do you want from us?" Emperor Zeftos asked, his voice hollow. "Reparations for the civilian deaths," Parkman replied. "Establishment of formal diplomatic relations. And most importantly, a guarantee that Zephyrian forces will not attack human civilians again. And if we refuse..." Parkman's expression grew cold. "Your Majesty, my government has been fighting a multi-galactic war for over 2 centuries. We faced enemies that could devour stars and fleets that could blot out entire nebulae. Your empire, while impressive by local standards, is not considered a significant military threat. The casual dismissal hit harder than any threat could have." Emperor Zeftos realized that his mighty empire wasn't even worth the humans' full attention. However, Parkman continued, "We prefer diplomatic solutions. Humanity has no interest in conquest for its own sake. We have bigger problems to deal with." "What kind of problems?" Parkman exchanged glances with his staff. "It's a kind that require us to maintain 14 active fleets, Your Majesty. It's a kind that make disputes with. Local powers seem... trivial." As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding on the human ships. Parkman turned to his communications officer. "Report, sir. We're receiving priority signals from Terra Command. The Andromeda situation has escalated. 1st Fleet is requesting immediate reinforcement." Parkman nodded grimly. "Prep the fleet. For emergency jump, We'll conclude negotiations with the Zephyrians after we deal with the current crisis. Emperor Zeftos watched in amazement as the massive human fleet began to reorganize itself with mechanical precision. In minutes, they would be gone, leaving him to contemplate the terrifying reality of humanity's true power. The main fleet hasn't even arrived yet, he whispered to himself. Finally understanding what kind of universe he really lived in, Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.